welcome to Portugal College. Those of you who are guests, thank you for coming. Students, good to have you back for the evening. It's my privilege to introduce our speaker tonight, a good friend of mine and colleague for some 15 years, Professor Karen Bishop, got her master's degree at the University of Connecticut in sociology. She is currently working on a PhD at Pacifica Graduate Institute in community liberation and eco-psychology. She is, as I said, a longtime member of the Portugal College community, a wonderful friend, a great teacher, and a really important contributing member of our PC faculty. Welcome, Karen Bishop.
Thank you. Now I think I have to go home. I can't live up to that. Okay, well, thank you guys for being here. So I'm going to talk a little bit about tonight, about the relationship between the human community, really, and the environment. And I got interested in looking at that relationship actually a while ago. Actually, every time I think back to when I got interested in it, I always think of an earlier time, but it wasn't like an academic thing. So, but I think, where is my daughter? Do you remember your third grade? Yeah, now I can embarrass it. Your third grade field trip to Circle J. It was noon. Anybody have kids that go up to? It was like a star party. Noon. There was something happening with the moon, and Professor Good was up there, and so for school, you know, we had arranged this field trip to go up there. Well, it was completely overcast, and so we couldn't see the moon, you know, and I was like, okay, so this was, why are we here, what are we doing? And the educators up there completely baffled me. I mean, I just was absolutely amazed by how much we learned in the dark with no light and no moon. And so instead of looking at the moon, what we did was we took a walk and onto the land. And they were so impressed with the kids because when they said you have to be silent, you know, her class, they actually were silent and everybody was really amazed. But anyway, we had to walk in a single line and very quietly and very carefully we walked through this very dark landscape, and then she would have us stop and just listen in utter silence. And it was like an awakening for me. I had never, ever done that. Just listened to the sounds of the landscape around me. And I love nature. You know, I vote yes for trees. Who doesn't like trees, for goodness sake, right? But I hadn't really, in a long time, I hadn't really engaged with nature in that way, recognizing really myself as a part of the natural world in that same way, there with them. And when you remove light, and you remove, you know, being able to see anything. I mean, it was dark. She was telling us, now there are bears, but, you know, but she was saying, you know, I haven't seen one in a long time or whatever, and so everybody was kind of nervous. And it was just amazing how, you know, there were all these parents and the kids were there, and, you know, she took us out of our regular modern world into this natural world just up the road, and it completely sort of shifted something in me that I haven't really ever recovered from, I mean, in a good way. And she drew our attention to, after we listened in silence, she drew our attention to the sounds of owls and the sounds of, now I can't remember, of course, but she identified afterward all these different sounds of animals and life around us that we would not have really acknowledged otherwise. And so it was really moving for me, and because I'm a really visual person. How many visual people? Yeah, I feel, you know, I really am affected by the visual, and so listening, you know, I mean, it's not that I don't enjoy sound or listen, but that was like a new thing for me, to listen to the land, to listen to nature. So So that's kind of the first little awakening I had. So anyway, and as Dr. Keel said, I've been studying my PhD at Pacifica Graduate Institute. If you haven't ever heard of it, this is just a screenshot of the webpage, and it's an amazing place. And there's all kinds of psychology that they teach. They do clinical psychology, counseling psychology, you know, all sorts of things, but my interest is in community liberation and eco-psychology. And that really is because it's the closest thing to sociology, you know, that they have, and my first love is sociology, so that's what I kind of am focusing on there. So as those of you who know me and are students of mine, or have been students of mine, you know that I'm just kind of a little bit loopy about society, and so I get all excited about it, and I just love studying the social world. But one thing that I've come to learn is that if we're going to study the social world and we want to understand humanity and human behavior, we really have to recognize that we are a part of the natural world. We're not something separate from the natural world. And when I first started out in sociology, that really wasn't ever discussed. You know, I mean, it was just social systems and structure and culture, and you know, but there really was very little discussion about how the natural environment influences us in those areas. It's not that nobody talked about it, but it just wasn't, you know, a dominant theme at all. And so now I've come to really be affected by that and recognize its salience, its importance in studying humanity. So I really have, I feel like as much as I'm just a sociologist at heart, I'm passionate about society, about sociology, I find myself feeling constricted by the bounds of different disciplines. So I've been reading in many different disciplines as I've been going through this program. Some of the things assigned and some of them not assigned. I get, you know, stumble onto them and other things that I'm looking at. But I just brought a couple of examples of some of the different sorts of things that are relevant to what we're talking about today. A whole area of, you know, related to what I'm talking about today is eco-psychology. And then within eco-psychology is ecotherapy. So there are, you know, psychologists and marriage and family therapists and so on, clinicians who are ecotherapists. And so they very much use the natural world to contribute to healing. So that's probably the most direct connection with what we're going to talk about today. And this is something that is relatively new in the United States since the 90s, I would say. And it's just starting to kind of become a little more well-known in the mainstream now. But my husband is a clinician, mental health clinician from the UK, and he's told me that for many years, they don't really see that as anything special. People have been doing it there in the mainstream for a long, long time, recognizing the value for mental health. So that's something new. Let's see, this is something, I love this book. It's called The Secret Knowledge of Water, and it's by Craig Childs. And what he does is he follows water in the desert. So you never think about the desert as being a place for water and having this, you know, ability to sustain so much life. But he kind of turns that idea on his head, and he spends, you know, his whole time just out in the desert for just weeks and months at a time. And a lot of times he has to be awake during the night to follow the water and to see the life forms that emerge when the water is there at night, and then by the time they dry up during the day, you know, they're gone again. So I find that just kind of a fascinating paradox, you know, that there's so much life in the water, in the desert, in water, because that's an idea that I sort of am challenged by, because I grew up on the East Coast, and you know, so this life in the drought in the Southwest is still rather foreign to me, but I've been here a really long time now. You know, I shouldn't say that, but you know, who I am is kind of something not familiar with that. Another great book is Gary Snyder's The Practice of the Wild. Some of you are nodding your head, you know about some of these things. This is an awesome study on trauma in animals, in particular elephants. And it's crazy, you like we just aren't used to talking about animals like that. But this is an amazing study of how the elephant community very much experiences things just like humans do. And this has been incredibly enlightening for many people who never ever thought that before, and they have a lot to teach us. This is a philosophical study, Maurice Merleau-Ponty on nature. There's just a couple of things up here that, I thought I would share. Carl Jung, the famous psychiatrist and analytical psychologist, he very much wrote about, he may really have been the first eco-psychologist. He very much wrote about the human connection with the earth a long, long time ago, and really argued that this point that we as human beings and nature are one. And he has some beautiful writing that illustrates that. Gaston Bachelard, Water and Dreams. And then a really accessible book, if anybody's familiar with Barbara Kingsolver, is Animal Vegetable Miracle. It's just a simple story of, Barbara Kingsolver is a contemporary novelist, and it's just a story of her and her family's effort to try to live off the land, to not, buy vegetables that, come from a faraway place and actually grow and eat in season everything that they ate, so everything that they needed. So anyway, that's a couple of examples of some of those great resources. Okay, so this work that I've been doing is, it really is a blend of different disciplines. And the bounds of disciplines can be really hard for us sometimes. Any of my colleagues probably know it's very difficult. We cross over all the time. And that's what kind of keeps it interesting. We enjoy talking to each other about these things. So what I'm talking about today really emerges out of course, my background in sociology, but also out of psychology and ecology. And the two together, psychology and ecology, really kind of form together to form the discipline of eco-psychology. And so what I want to look at is the interconnections among psyche, community, and the environment. Okay, so ecology, a lot of you probably heard that term, but may not know what it is. It's basically just the science of the relationship between organisms and their environment. So ecology just studies, all the life forms in any particular natural world. Now, another thing that I have kind of taken an interest in, and I won't spend too much time on it, I want to introduce you to it just because you guys might want to participate. But at Purdue University, the Center for Global Soundscape has been really kind of leading the way in a sub-discipline of ecology into sound ecology. So what they're really doing is studying the different kinds of sounds that exist in the environment and their effects on people. And so this is, to me, very fascinating. It's coming out of ecology, but do you see how that really crosses over, into psychology, into sociology, geography, all kinds of things. And so let me just ask some of you, if you guys think about how many of you enjoy spending time in nature? Yeah, look at that, wow. And how many of you would you say feel like you have a really deep, strong connection with nature? Maybe some of you grew up on farms or have worked in the fields or raised animals, right? This is a very big ag community, so a lot of people develop those relationships here, maybe more than in other areas. So what would you say, anybody can just jump in here, are some of the sounds that you experience in nature that are memorable to you, that affect you? What? You're nodding your head, Dr. Keel. What's coming to mind?
The redwoods up in the north.
Yeah.
And the sound is the absence of sound. It's so stunning,
Wow.
so captivating.
Wow, that's an interesting take. So it's just utterly...
You get off into the old growth redwoods where the
Yeah.
plant has getting disturbed, and it just absorbs all the sound.
Wow.
It's really peaceful.
That's amazing. So when you're in that space and you're in that environment and the absence of sound is there, how would you describe what happens to you?
Just tranquility, peace.
Mm-hmm. So does it give you an opportunity to go inward? you know, like reflect or do you take that time to do it? You just feel peaceful and then you carry on?
For me, it's more of a sense of awe
Yeah.
at the environment itself.
Cool, good. How about somebody else? What's another kind of sound that affects you? Yeah.
Maybe like what you were saying, that going up on top of a mountain, like I used to live down south, and there was a mountain up there called San Francisco Mountain. And it was about 11,000 feet up, and you go up there, and it's not just the sound of axes, or the absence of sound, but just the clear smell of this absolute peace. It was amazing.
Wow, so now you're experiencing more of the senses of sound, but then there's also like a smell that you associate with that.
Just clean air.
Clean air. Boy, yeah, we need some of that, don't we? Yeah. Yeah, in a bad way. Good, good. What's another one? Yes?
I was thinking like the way the wind moves the trees and the leaves.
Yes, that's a big one for me too. Yeah, it's, whatever that is, it's just, it will take me out of any kind of stress, you know, whatever is going on in my head, I can be taken right out of it by just listening to the wind move through the leaves and the trees. Yeah, a lot of people experience that, I think. What about water? Is anybody moved by water or the sound of water? Yeah, me too. I have a fountain on my patio at home, and I absolutely, my husband will tell you, my family will tell you, I have to have that fountain on, and I work so much better with it. I just, you know, it calms me. I just feel it's all about water. I'll come back to that. Okay, so this project that the Center for Global Soundscape is working on is they're working on getting everybody involved in how sound affects us, sound in the environment. And they're not just looking at natural sounds, like I'm kind of focusing on nature here, you know, water and the wind and stuff, but they look at the sounds of traffic and, you know, all kinds of sound, because, right, it's all a part of the environment, so for them, they do all of that. But anyway, so I just wanted to draw your attention to that. And so they have just a lot of interesting stuff on the website. But there is a app that you can download on your smartphone, and already, as of earlier today, 2,008 people had done so. And so they are getting everybody to collect data on sound. And so you download this app on your cell phone, and it's really easy. You just record different sounds, and you can identify how the sound makes you feel. You say where you recorded it, you know, what is it of, that sort of thing. So it's really interesting. And when you go to that website, like this is a screenshot of it, when you go to the website, you'll see those numbers changing live while you're looking at it. It's pretty cool. And then they have analytics. So they have, it's probably a little bit hard to see, but the blue graph up there talks about how the sounds affect people emotionally. So they have, it makes them feel relaxed, it makes them feel stressed, it makes them curious, you know, whatever, things like that. And then the green graph, if you can see that in the middle, are sounds in nature, mammals, birds, so insects. And then the yellow graphs are the sounds of the earth, the atmosphere itself. So wind, rain, water, thunder, things like that. And there's some other ones too. Those are just a couple of examples. And they're getting this data from all over the world. Now, let me back up a little bit actually. So I wanted to just introduce you a little bit to this ecological study that's going on that literally is studying sound in the ecosystem and how it affects people. But only one component of what they're doing is asking people how it makes them feel. You know, they're also looking at other aspects of it because they're not, you know, studying psychology really, they're studying ecology, so they're kind of focusing on the whole thing. Whereas what we do at Pacifica and what I'm doing is then going into the relationship between that and psyche, right? So I'm just going to kind of take a little turn now into another area into psychology. Now the thing about psychology, how many of you have had psychology in here? General psych. Yeah, good, good. And who remembers what your definition is of that? Don't we have final exams coming up? How many of you are in psychology right now? So, study of what? Human behavior, the mind, I heard, right? Yeah. So there's a lot of different ways to define it, and there's many different psychologies. That's one of the things I want to point out to you. These are just 4, but there's many of them. The most common psychology that you'll be exposed to in the United States is cognitive behaviorist psychology. That is, the science of the mind and human behavior, basically. But there's also community psychology. This is my area. There's indigenous psychology, there's liberation psychologies, and that's plural because liberation psychologies are different everywhere. And liberation psychology is really about social justice and addressing inequality and looking at how colonization, for example, has affected communities around the world and created trauma and that sort of thing. So these are a couple of books. Alan Kilpatrick's, he's an anthropologist. He studies indigenous psychology, and his book is The Night Has a Naked Soul. And then Mary Watkins and Helene Schulman, their book is on psychology of liberation. Those are a couple examples. Another one is archetypal psychology. Now, James Hillman, who just passed away a few years ago, is probably the most eminent archetypal psychologist. He really developed the field of archetypal psychology. Who knows what an archetype is? Okay, so I have another class I think I want to develop. Archetypes are these really images in a way, but they don't have to be visual images, but that they tend to emerge in every culture, every part of the world, everywhere. They emerge over and over again. And so there's something beyond cultural construction. Like in sociology, we talk about the social construction of things, right? And so, but archetypes are something beyond that. And so, they really require a deeper study is what they do. So anyway, Hillman is one of the people who has done the most work with that. And he emerges, his work comes out of the tradition of Carl Jung, and before him, or around that time, Freud as well. But what he suggests is that when you're trying to study something with depth, the psychology piece of it, I'll just read it to you, his quote, psychologizing with depth requires ideas as the eyes of the soul to give psyche its power of insight and its means of prying open, stripping bare, and seeing through. So what he's really talking about is studying anything and everything that affects the human experience with this incredible depth and reverie, with almost a sacred approach, but it's also very rigorous. So what he says again, this is another, I don't want to misquote him, so it's really a process of interiorizing, of moving from just kind of seeing things on the surface to really looking to the less visible. And then he also explains when we look deeply with our hearts to show what lies behind or within, it is truer and more real than what is evident. So this is also related to what we do in sociology. Some of my sociology students are in here, right? The first rule of sociology in some ways is that things are not as they seem to be, right? And so that's kind of the same idea, but here we're really going much, much deeper. So that idea of reverie and insight that Hillman argues for is really this, Hillman identifies it, but Watkins discusses it as notitia. And it's really the idea, and I'm just going to quote again, because I don't want to misstate it, but Watkins points out that the depth psychological engagement requires being with and in the world in a way that invites reverie, image, and insight, an openness to being tutored. So what Watkins is saying here, and she's interpreting Hillman's point for us, is that we would benefit by being willing to be tutored, to be taught by anything with which we engage. And many people are like that anyway. Don't you know, people are just kind of really thoughtful, and they sort of take lessons and wisdom from whatever experiences or things that they encounter. And so what they're really arguing is that this is a way for us to really grow, you know, as a species, to really grow in our humanity. And this also can come from deep listening, basically. So deep listening and acknowledgement of the imagery in the environment. And so when Hillman talks about image, it's not just visual image, it's also auditory image. It means things that we can hear, things that we can see, things that we can smell, we can experience. So in this context, all of that counts as an image. Now, some of you may have seen a talk or seen the work of Matt Black. He's a documentary photographer, internationally known photographer who happens to have, we've been fortunate enough to have him come and speak and show his work a number of times. And he spoke on this work he did in Santiago Milatango, I'm sure I'm not saying that right. And the series is called After the Fall, and it's about this experience of the land drifting down the hill at the rate of 1 meter a day. And so this caused all kinds of problems for the people living there because it basically, they lost their livelihood. They weren't able to farm anymore. It's much more complicated than this, but it really affected them. And so a lot of people from that area ended up having to migrate to the United States so that they could find a way to make a living and help their families, feed their families. But I was struck by this work, and there was a video that produced that went with it. And as he worked with the people there, one of the women that was interviewed in the video talked about her experience of grief as she saw the land, to her it felt like dying in this way. And the way that she described it moved me, and I thought, wow, I've never heard anybody really speak of land as if it was a family member. And so I was really struck by this connection that she and the other members of her community had with the land. And I thought, that's something we've really lost in the West. We've really lost that in the modern Western world. And so when I asked you guys, how many of you experienced, something positive in nature, you feel connected to it, I don't know that, I think here, there's more of that because it's an agricultural community, but I think around the States, I don't know how, I don't know what you guys' sense is, but that doesn't really feel like a dominant part of, American culture, So anyway, I was really struck by that. So this is one example of a culture, of a community and a society that truly sees the land as family. For me, listening to the land really is about water. I was talking about the sound of water and hearing the fountain and that sort of thing. So water really affects me more than anything. But not everybody is that way. A lot of people have different experiences. It's more the wind for some people, or maybe it's both. But this is a photograph of Sunset Lake in the community of Benson, Vermont, where my family is from. It's a tiny little village in Vermont. And I only lived there for maybe a year, maybe 2 years at the most. But we would go back every summer, or every other summer or so visiting family, and most of my family is still there. And one of my earliest, if not, it may have been my earliest memory actually, is I nearly drowned in this lake. So it's this beautiful, beautiful lake, and it's very much affects as a part of everybody's lives there. But I had this experience where my older brother, bless his heart, was trying to teach me how to swim. And so he handed me a rock, and he said, now just hold on to this rock. And I know you're just thinking, oh yeah, I've heard that one before. He's trying to get rid of the little sister. But, I really think, for him, it wasn't a heavy rock, right? But he said, just hold on to it and then kick your legs, and that'll teach you how to stay above water. Well, I wasn't even, I don't know how old I was. I may have been 3 or something. And so, I know, now you're going, this is really suspicious. But anyway, he was probably 8 or 9, and so he gave me the rock, and I thought, okay, and I'm holding on to it, following instructions like a good military kid that I was. and kicking my legs as hard as I can, but what do you think was happening? I was going down, 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 right? But what was I doing? Was I letting go of the rock? No, because I had been instructed to hold on to the rock. So I'm holding on to the rock, and I'm kicking, and I'm just going down, down. But here's what's interesting, and I don't know if anybody else has had an experience like this. I wasn't afraid. Maybe because I didn't know I should be afraid, but I was afraid. I instead found myself fascinated, and I remember it like it was yesterday, fascinated by what I could see under the water and what was going on around me. And that moment was one of those moments, you know, like when I was on the field trip with my daughter, except of course it was way, way younger. And it was just this moment of I don't know, recognizing that there was something beyond just, you know, playing in the water for fun. That being in the water, it's like I felt myself suddenly a part of nature. You know, that it was one and the same thing, and I wasn't afraid. And so that was a really significant experience for me. And then finally, I guess I, you know, figured out, well, I'm gonna need to take a breath here or something. So I dropped the rock and I came up, and everybody else was freaking out. You know, when I came up, you know, they were all, you know, scared and panicked. And that's when I got scared, when I saw how scared they were. But at that moment, I wasn't scared until then. And, but for me, one of the things I recognized from that experience is that water, being in the water, because you're literally, for me, literally inside almost the earth, right? You're down on the level, has that effect of helping me to realize that I am nature and it is me. It's all the same thing. And just taking that moment to a reverie of pause, you know, to listen and to be aware of that has a healing effect. It takes us out of the things that are stressing us out, or that, I mean, here I was, you know, it was a near drowning experience, right? But I wasn't stressed out at all. I was just lost in that reverie. And so this is a, you know, for me, that's kind of a significant example of how things can work like this. Now, another approach that comes out of indigenous societies is the medicine wheel. And how many, anybody ever heard of the wheel? A few people, yeah. So, you know, there's lots of, you know, different societies that have sort of their own approach to these things, but of course, I only am familiar with just one that I've learned, but the idea of the medicine wheel is that we use these elements of nature to find wisdom and a better understanding of who we are, of ourselves. And that's just, I'm sure that's not, I'm doing a very inadequate job of explaining it, but anyway, so one book by a Westerner on it is called The Four Shields. And so, one of the things I wanted to study in this relationship between nature and humanity and healing is how community plays into that. And so a year and a half ago now, or almost 2 years ago, or when was that? Was that last year? I don't even remember now. It was either last year or the year before. I went to the wild. I went into the wilderness with a group of people to study, to be a participant observer. So this was a research project I was doing, but I was also experiencing it with them at the same time. So I wanted to see the effect on nature and community in terms of healing. And so that's what I did. So it was about a week long, and included in that was a 24-hour vision fast. Not vision fast, I'm sorry, just a 24-hour solo fast. And so that's when we went off on the solo journey into the woods by ourselves, and we fasted and just experienced our time in nature, and saw and went in with questions to ask, and looking for answers to some of, you know, whatever we might need help with, and to see if that would help us make sense of things. And so it was an amazing experience, and I will at some point write more and speak more about that, but as it is, how many of you have had, well, I know I can see a lot of my own students here for sociology. Anybody in anthropology in here? Yeah. So if you know about doing research and participant observation and ethnography and such, there's rules about that. And so I haven't gotten the permission from everybody in the group yet to share pieces of their stories. Most people have, but not everybody. So I can't go into a whole lot of detail about that experience, but I want you to know that this is part of what's inspired my talk today, is this experience that I had with this group. So the 4 shields, this is a very quick, very, simple overview, is the idea that there's north, south, east, and west, the 4 directions. And each direction represents a different component. So in terms of our development through our lives, north would represent adulthood, while south is childhood, west is adolescence, and so on. In terms of seasons, north would be winter, south is summer, west represents the fall, and east represents spring. And in terms of an element in nature, like the south represents water, east represents fire. Did I get that right? West is earth. Somebody who knows, I hope I remember that right. Anyway, so that's the basic idea. So various cultures around the world use something like this in their approach to healing and well-being. So there I am, looking very tired in my backpack. But this was in the high desert of the Southwest. I can't say exactly where, but so this is, I went on this wilderness journey and I backpacked. I'd never backpacked before, and it wasn't a long journey on my own, thankfully I didn't take. And then there's my pack on the right, so we had to go find a spot and just take water with us and, just do basic things. And spend 24 hours out there in nature, alone with the trees and the lions and the tigers and bears. Oh my. So I was a little nervous about that, but I thought, well, you know what, if something like that's going to happen, it's going to happen. Nothing I can do. I just have to make peace with it. So one person on our journey, though, we're pretty sure that she had a few close encounters with a mountain lion. So yeah, that was pretty amazing, but that wasn't me, thankfully. So, in this experience that I had with them, what we would do is we would take what are called medicine walks, and we would go, one day we would go out and take our north medicine walk, another day we would take our east medicine walk and our west medicine walk. And the very last one, actually the last one for the 24-hour solo fast was the east-west medicine walk, and that is where we look for wisdom and so on. And so the idea behind fasting is, and some places do much more advanced rites of passage, like they'll do a 4-day fast or something like that. But this was just 24 hours. But the idea behind the fasting is so that, in our lives, we spend so much of our time and energy thinking about, well, maybe I'm revealing too much. I do anyway. What I'm going to eat next, So what am I going to do for lunch? What am I going to do for dinner? So we spend a lot of energy around that. Thinking about what it's going to be, preparing it. I have to get home so I can cook dinner, whatever. And so by taking that away and just not doing that, all of a sudden, right? We just have to kind of be. And so that's one of the ideas behind that. And so that was really interesting. And some people say, well, it's the hunger, but I don't know whether it's the hunger or the reverie or just the seeing through, as Hillman would say, or just looking deeply and listening, to the land around us. But it does lead to greater insight. You get the opportunity to really have insights that you might not have had otherwise. So, this is a photo of, that's sagebrush, right? Who knows? Is that sage? I think so, yeah. And so that was everywhere. And I didn't know what it was. I don't have, I don't know a lot about trees and bushes and things. And that was just everywhere. And one of the things that I went out for this particular workshop was designed to help people deal with loss and grief So I had endured a great deal of loss in my family in the last number of years, and one of them was my mother had this devastating and debilitating stroke. And so that really affected me. There was a number of other things it did too, but that really affected me, and I was having difficulty actually, spending as much time with her as I needed to, because it was so hard to see what she had lost. It was so hard to, and so many people are really good at this, and I know some of my classes I've talked about it with, they can really be okay with, with someone when they've lost so much. But it was absolutely just so hard for me to do that, and it was an awful thing because I just adored my mother, and I wanted to spend time with her. I did spend time with her, I needed to, but I never felt, I really struggled with feeling comfortable with it. And so this is one of the things that I wanted to deal with. That was one of the intentions I went there with, was to see if I could find a way to handle that more easily and be able to hold her paralyzed hand, or just put lotion on her arm, or so those things were just really, really hard for me. And they wouldn't have been before, but once she had this loss, it was just a challenge. So that's one of the things that I really struggled with. Well, when I kept seeing these shrubs everywhere, and they're so dead and dry and just lifeless, the more I looked at them, the more I realized that they were beautiful. And they had a kind of life in them. And, the movements of the branches, to me, they just capture such artistry, I guess. So if you look at how these branches just flow and move from one section to the next, I could find myself almost hypnotized by it in a good way. And I started recognizing that the beauty that I was able to see in these shrubs that initially struck me, they just struck me as so sad and dead and dry, and gosh, they really need water, basically. And, and I did not see them as beautiful in the beginning at all. But the more I spent time there, and the more quiet space I had to just reflect, experience them, I began to see that they were beautiful, and that they had sort of captured, almost frozen in time, the life that they once had. And so I found myself realizing that this is how I needed to see my mother. I needed to see, that her beauty and her life was still there. And so that was the lesson that I got from these ugly, sad little shrubs, was that, my mother was paralyzed and had lost so much, but not everything. And so that helped me realize that we are nature. Nature is us. It's all the same thing. And I got immense comfort from that, and it truly did help me. And I think, I don't think I would be violating too much with my agreement with my fellow journeyers, but I think it's fair to say that they all experienced the same kind of thing, but for their own stories, for their own challenges, they had those same experiences. So that was quite powerful to me, and that's what the contemporary mental health community is now really finally starting to catch on to. That, we don't really have to be always prescribing one pharmaceutical after another that leads to all these different side effects, or, we don't have to do all these different, maybe we just need to slow down and reconnect with ourselves and the nature that we're already a part of. And that requires that looking inward. But it really is such a challenge in the modern world to slow down, right? I mean, how many of us, you feel like you have to be responding to email, talking to the phone, I'm writing on my computer, or I'm just constantly, if I'm not multitasking, I feel lazy, right? Well, that's just so at odds with really being connected with ourselves. ourselves, isn't it? It's like that's kind of dividing ourselves and carving ourselves up for all these different purposes. So this is just one way to help us remember how to do that. And as I mentioned, even ecologists are recognizing that, you know, there's a lot to be learned here in this relationship between the human psyche, human well-being, and listening to the land. So these are a few references. There's just if you're interested, Matt Black's photography can be found at mattblack.com. And Hillman's work, there's a few that I mentioned: Revisioning Psychology, The Thought of the Heart and the Soul of the World. Watkins is another article that she wrote. And then the music that you couldn't hear that we were struggling with in the beginning is a beautiful, if you can go on YouTube or something and check it out, it's by Ogata is his last name, and it's called Cough Bureau, and I believe that's Swahili for Rain is Coming. So there's a music video on YouTube, so check it out. That was going to be the beginning and to get us into the mood. So thank you very much. Anybody have any questions that you want to, or experiences you'd like to share?
You talk about that in many contexts and healing, and is this a personal healing or is it generalized healing?
Give me a little bit more of the beginning of your sentence, which
It talks a lot about, and maybe references to healing
yes.
and your medicine healing.
Oh, right. What
and-
kind of healing am I talking about?
Yeah.
Yes, I think I'm really, for me, what I'm interested in is emotional healing. You know, healing from trauma, healing from grief, you know, I mean, those kinds of things that we experience all the time that the mental health community is really focused on. Now, obviously, there's a lot of people who study different kinds of physical healing, but I don't know as much about that or haven't studied as much about that. Does that answer your question? Okay. Okay. Yes?
I've never really been a nature person, but I read the book
Mm-hmm.
and she did the same healing by going to this nature trail, to comfort the death of her mother. And I feel like that's very similar to you.
Yes.
She found a lot of things throughout her, experience reminded her of her mother.
Mm-hmm.
And as she did the whole trail, at the end of it, she found that she got over it. She was able to confront herself over the nature and obstacles that she went through that reminded her of her mother.
I'm so glad you shared that. I don't know if everybody could hear her, but she talked about the book called Wild, which is a movie, right, with Reese Witherspoon? Yeah, I've heard of it, but I didn't know anything about it. So that's great. So that's really kind of exploring that same experience. Now, that's based on a true story? Is that,
Yeah.
It is a true story. Okay,
Yeah.
cool.
I love it.
Wow. Wow, I'm going to have to check that out. At least the movie. Thank you. What else? Yes?
What was the name of that app?
Oh, it is Record the Earth. Yeah, you're welcome. Yeah, I think, oh, it's gone anyway. Yeah, Record the Earth. And if you can either go to that, you can get it from Google Play Store, it's also for iPhone. And it's really easy. You basically just put it on your phone, it's free, and you just literally push a big red button on your cell phone and record a sound, and then you report to them. And so it becomes a part of this huge data set. So it's pretty fascinating. Cool. Any other questions? Yes?
What are maybe some practical daily things we can all do to kind of get in better connection with this?
Mm-hmm.
Some of us might not be able to go on a journey quest.
Right. Yeah.
That
Oh,
sounds very
exactly.
awesome. But I think it's very important, turn the phones off, take
Yes.
time, just daily, 5 minutes here, 10 minutes there. What are some things that, to just start paying attention and,
Yes.
waking up that we can all kind of do?
think walking, just taking a walk, you know? I don't know about you guys, but it's really hard for me to just make the time to do that, but when I do, I'm always glad I do. And it's the listening to the wind through the trees, it's the birds, it's always those things that I really appreciate the most about it. And it does give you that time, Professor Osborne and I were just talking about that the other day, that time to reflect, you know, and like you might have some sort of dilemma or challenge, or maybe it's your title or topic or a paper you're working on and you just can't, you're stuck and you can't get through it. And then you do something like go for a walk and suddenly it just all flows, you know? So those are just really simple things, and for me, I might sit on my patio and just listen to the birds and my fountain and, just for a little while, it really makes every bit of difference, just changes your whole, it gives you that moment, that time to pause, to just take pause, because the rest of my day, I don't know about you guys, but the rest of my day is non-stop, just non-stop. So you have to kind of take pause to just remember, that we are a part of nature, and nature is a part of us. So, good. Thank you guys again. I appreciate you coming.